Big Mac Talks.
For the second straight NFL season, 66 quarterbacks have started at the position. In this video, we're going to rank each and every one of them. Before we get started, I would ask you please subscribe to the channel. I'm currently trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, and helping achieve that milestone is greatly appreciated. Now, let's get to the ranking. First, although he is credited with a start, Aaron Rodgers did not have a game's worth of statistics to rank him by, so he is going to be excluded from this. Next, we'll take a quick look at the players ranked from 65 to 51. We won't review each of them in detail, but we'll just note a couple of things. The worst quarterback to start an NFL game and complete the whole game this season was Clayton Tune. In his lone start, he threw for just 52 yards, his longest completion was 14 yards, had a passer rating of 22.5, which was 15 points lower than any other starter, did not throw a touchdown, and he turned the ball over a total of 3 times. This isn't to make a full judgment on Tune already, given it was his first and only NFL start, but for the sake of comparison, he was unfortunately the worst in 2023. The rest of the bottom 15 is largely consistent with guys who just played a game in Week 17, as well as some backup options that did not perform great. Jaren Hall looked good in one of his starts, going 6 for 7 early on before being forced to leave with an injury, so there was just not enough to rank him higher. Carson Wentz played decent in his only start, giving him ranking 51, and Mitch Trubisky was of course terrible in both of his starts. The next group we'll look at in our ranking is from number 50 to 36. First here, we have Nick Mullins, who threw for 370 yards per game, but didn't look impressive doing so, turning the ball over more than he scored and failing to win a game. Oppositely, the number 47 ranked Andy Dalton threw for an NFL high 58 attempts and looked in vintage Red Rocket form while doing so, winning his only start while throwing 2 touchdowns and not turning the ball over in a 361-yard performance. Number 45 is Daniel Jones, who was the worst opening day quarterback in 2023, going 1-5 across 6 starts with 4 games under 200 yards and tying Tim Boyle for the worst TD to INT ratio. Both Tommy DeVito and Tyrod Taylor are ranked well above him, which says just how bad Jones was this year. Spots 43 to 40 go to Jimmy Garoppolo, Ryan Tannehill, Mac Jones, and Zach Wilson. Each of these players was replaced as a starter some more than once and did not show promise for future seasons. In the case of Jimmy G and Tannehill, they were each outplayed by rookies, while Jones and Wilson were turnover machines. Wilson was also reluctant to throw the ball into the end zone with just 6 touchdowns and 11 starts compared to 13 turnovers. Still, I have him above Mac Jones, who had truly given up by the Patriots by Week 12. For the same reason, I rank Bailey Zappi above Jones as well, at number 37. Jared Stidham and Drew Lock both played decently in 2 starts, each having a TD to INT ratio above 1.5 and a passer rating above 85, but just needed more playing time to move up further, so I have them at 39 and 38. Finally, at number 36, Colts rookie Anthony Richardson did not have the best passing stats, but he was able to go 2-2 as a rookie and took very good care of the ball, putting up 7 total touchdowns to only 2 turnovers. Skill and talent-wise, he should be higher on the list in the future, but based on actual snaps taken this year, I can't rank him higher. I'll now shrink the group down to 10 players as we go from number 35 to number 26. At number 35, Kenny Pickett was brutal in 2023. The fact I ranked Mason Rudolph above him, who played only 3 games opposed to Pickett's 12, says enough. Pickett averaged just 0.5 touchdowns per game while having 6 games of under 200 passing yards. He just seemed scared to do anything but run around. Because of this, I have him very low on the ranking. At number 34, it is disappointing to see Deshaun Watson so low on the list. His numbers were slightly impacted by injuries, but also Watson was pretty average when he did play, despite going 5-1 as a starter. He had more fumbles than rushing touchdowns, he had one of the lowest completion percentage among starters, and he threw for under 200 yards a game with a team that saw Joe Flacco, who came off the couch, throw for over 300 yards a game and nearly the same amount of starts. Watson was average at best this season, so he's number 34. Number 33 is Tyrod Taylor, who played decently in his 5 starts, but I have the 32nd ranked Tommy DeVito as the Giants' best quarterback this season, as he really added a new life to the team down the stretch. He did average 70 less passing yards per game and 5 less rushing yards per game than Taylor, but was able to go 500 as a rookie and had a 7-to-1 TD to INT ratio, which is fantastic, especially given the criticism around his arm. Coming in at number 31, Mason Rudolph deserved to be higher than several players he played less games than, given his strong performance across those 3 games, which led the Steelers to the playoffs. He won every game without turning the ball over and led all quarterbacks who started at least one game in passer rating and yards per attempt. Rudolph really took advantage of his opportunity, and if he played more at the same level, he would be ranked much higher. Bryce Young comes in as the lowest quarterback to start at least 16 games at number 30. I did want to rank him higher considering he is a rookie on a terrible team and did manage to have a positive TD to INT ratio. However, outside of this, everything statistically is pretty negative for Bryce. He had under a 60% completion percentage, had 11 games with less than 200 yards, and averaged well under a touchdown per game. Young also did not manage to have a rushing touchdown while losing 6 fumbles. It was a rough rookie season for him, to say the least. 2 rookies who didn't have great opening seasons but were still better than Bryce Young were Will Levis and Aidan O'Connell, who I have at number 29 and number 26 respectively. Neither man was expected to be the starter at the beginning of the season, but eventually got the gig. Each of them won more games than the first overall pick in 2023, despite playing nearly 50% less games than him. They also had better stats than Young all around and showed potential as serviceable starters for the future, which justifies them as top 30 quarterbacks already. Josh Dobbs and Desmond Ridder also finished in the top 30 at numbers 28 and 27, but were not great by any means. Each man turned the ball over more than 15 times, which was greater than 1 turnover per game, and did not move the ball down the field effectively. Ridder did, however, have 3 games of 300 plus passing yards, while Dobbs had 0, so I've ranked Ridder above Dobbs. Now we enter the top 25. Having another recent number 1 overall pick so low is slightly depressing, but Kyler Murray is 25. He did not play badly when he did play, but only played half the season. His passing stats were average with a little more than a touchdown per game and a 2-to-1 touchdown to INT ratio. He also showed he still has legs by adding over 30 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns without losing any fumbles. Still, he did not do anything overly spectacular, so it's hard to place him any higher. At 24, I have Sam Howell. Let me first say that I'm not saying Howell is better than Kyler Murray, but instead that he had a more impactful 2023 season. Howell was not the greatest by any means, as he led the NFL in sacks taken and interceptions, but also did finish in the top 15 in passing yards, touchdowns, and first downs. He was also 5th in rushing touchdowns amongst QBs while only losing 2 fumbles. As a first-year starter, I'd like to try and focus on the positive for Howell, so I think this ranking is very fair. Everything I said about Kyler Murray at number 25 is accurate for Joe Burrow at number 23 as well. Injuries hurt his ranking as he only played 10 games, but when he did play, he looked average opposed to elite this season. His passing stats were nearly identical to Murray per game, but he was a bit more efficient with a 2.5 TD to INT ratio. He also did throw for over 300 yards on 3 occasions and went 5-5 across 10 starts. Burrow was not bad when he did play, however, we have previously seen him be much more elite, such as in 2022. Numbers 22 and number 21 were very close, but I have Gardner Minshew at 22 and Justin Fields at 21. Passing-wise, they are nearly identical, but Fields had a slightly better completion percentage, touchdown per game ratio, TD to INT ratio, and passer rating. He also had much better rushing stats. Minshew, on the other hand, was a bit more consistent throughout the entire season, but I think Fields raised his stock more than Minshew, which is why I have him higher as well. For both men, I would say average good is a fair assessment of their performance in 2023. At number 20, I have arguably the most surprising entry, Jake Browning. Browning only played 7 games in relief of Joe Burrow and had surprisingly good statistics. He was the only starter who played more than 5 games to have a completion percentage above 70%, had passing yards per game equivalent to Dak Prescott, and outperformed Joe Burrow in nearly every passing and rushing statistic. In fact, in less games than Burrow, Browning had just as many 300-plus yard passing games. If Browning played an entire season at the same level, he would have finished as a top 5 or 10 quarterback this year, which is phenomenal given his value before the season. Likewise, number 19 saw his value increase drastically in 2023 after he won Comeback Player of the Year. That man is Joe Flacco. Flacco only started 5 games, which also hurt his ranking, but when he did play, he was one of the most impactful players of the 2023 season. Of all players to start 5 games or more, Flacco was first in touchdowns and yards per game by a very wide margin. He also had an 80% 300 yard per game ratio, which is absolutely insane. He did turn the ball over more than once per game and had a modest 60% completion percentage, which also hurt his ranking slightly, but still, the 5-game run Flacco had solidifies his spot as a top 20 QB for the 2023 season. At 18, Trevor Lawrence seemingly regressed in 2023 as his passing stats declined virtually everywhere compared to 2022. He was largely hindered by his ability to fumble the ball basically every single game. He tied for the most fumbles lost by a QB this season with 7 and also added 14 interceptions for 21 turnovers to 25 touchdowns. Still, Lawrence was able to pass for over 250 yards per game, had a 1.5 TD to INT ratio, ran the ball effectively, and hit the 4,000-yard mark, which is why I've kept him in the top 20. At 17 and 16, Geno Smith had a shockingly similar season to Justin Herbert. Smith did play in 2 more games than Herbert, but both men finished with 20 touchdowns and 241 passing yards per game. Herbert was slightly more efficient everywhere and had a TD to INT ratio of nearly 3, reiterating his ability to be a top talent within the league. With that being said, Herbert, like Smith, looked good in 2023, but did not look great as he did previously. They both finished in the middle of the pack in nearly every statistical category, which is exactly why I have them where they are on this ranking. But with that being said, I expect Herbert to finish much higher in 2024 with Jim Harbaugh on his side. That brings us to the top 10. At this point, I will bring each group of players presented down from 10 to 5 at a time. From 15 to 11, we begin with Kirk Cousins at number 15. Personally, I think if Cousins played the entire 2023 season, he actually would have won the MVP or at least received votes based on his play in half the season. Cousins was second to only Joe Flacco in touchdowns per game and passing yards per game, but was also more efficient than Flacco with a TD to INT ratio of nearly 4 and a near 70% pass completion rate. Despite playing in just 8 games, Cousins was still top 20 in touchdowns and 24th in yards. 15 seems like the perfect ranking for Cousins when you divide performance by games played compared to every other quarterback in 2023. Moving on, I have Russell Wilson at 14. Despite the end of the season fallout with Denver, Wilson was actually one of the most efficient quarterbacks of 2023, finishing with an impressive 3.25 TD to INT ratio. He also finished 9th in passing touchdowns and 6th in passing plays above 40 yards on a rather messy offense and showed he still has an ability to run the ball, finishing 8th in rushing yards among QBs. Really, what hurt Wilson was his yardage numbers, as he finished with just over 200 yards per game and he had 8 games with under 200 passing yards within them. Compared to the players above him, this is where Wilson falls short in the ranking, keeping him out of the top 10 for 2023. Just above Wilson, Derek Carr is number 13. Carr was not really great at any point of the season, so it's hard to move him higher, but he was good and rather efficient. Of my top 15, he has the second lowest pass yardage per game outside of Wilson, but still has a very nice 3.12 TD to INT ratio, had a passer rating of nearly 100, finished with the most games over 300 yards with 6 and completion rate of nearly 70%. He also threw less than 0.5 interceptions per game, which was one of the best amongst all starters, and was 10th in passing touchdowns with 25, and again was above 500 as a starter. Derek Carr was good, but statistically, every player above him was just a bit better. Number 12 in my heart is still Tom Brady, but number 12 on this list is the man who replaced him, Baker Mayfield. Although Flacco won Comeback Player of the Year, Mayfield likely won Reputation Comeback of the Year, as the fans once rid off Baker, but now are rejoicing with him over his comeback story. Mayfield was good in 2023, putting up over 4,000 yards, having a strong 2.8 TD to INT ratio, and leading the Buccaneers to the playoffs. Mayfield actually turned the ball over much less than the players above him, but also had a few games where he massively struggled to move the ball down the field, specifically in weeks 14 and 18 and crucial division games where he had under 150 yards in each of those games. Still, he was good enough for a top 12 ranking. This player not being in my top 10 may be controversial, but I have Jalen Hurts at number 11. Hurts had 38 total touchdowns this season, including 15 rushing touchdowns, but gained only 39 yards on those scores. This makes his most impressive stat of the season not so stellar. Outside of his rushing performances, Hurts was average through the air, finishing with under 25 touchdowns and turning the ball over at 1.5 times the rate of Baker Mayfield. Additionally, his last 8 games of the season saw Hurts pass for just 8 touchdowns to 7 interceptions and having just one game with a passer rating above 100. He did this 4 times in his first 9 games. Hurts still has the talent to be an elite quarterback, but his inconsistent play this year leaves him outside the top 10. This allows us to enter the top 10, where I have Matthew Stafford at number 10. I don't know how else to say it, but Stafford had a typical Matthew Stafford season. He didn't have his stellar 2021 campaign again, but he threw for over 20 touchdowns, had roughly 4,000 yards, and had a TD to INT ratio above 2. He managed 5 games with 300 yards or more and didn't lose any fumbles. Still, Stafford was a consistent, reliable option and deserves a top 10 quarterback ranking for his 2023 performance. Number 9 will be Tua Tagovailoa. Tua led the NFL in yards in 2023, but like Hurts, Tua saw his stats dwindle down the stretch. Through his first 6 games, he had 14 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. This should have put him on track for over 40 touchdowns, however, he finished with less than 30. The decrease in efficiency by Tua also led to an overall slowing down of the Dolphins' offense, who went from AFC favorites to hardly making the playoffs between week 6 and 18. Still, leading the league in yards, having a passer rating above 100, a TD to INT ratio greater than 2, and a 69% pass completion allows Tua to slide into the top 10 for 2023. At number 8, I have the great Patrick Mahomes. This again is not calling Mahomes the 8th best QB in the league, as he is one of the best, but is saying his regular season performance was the 8th best among players at his position this year. If we include the playoffs, Mahomes is arguably first. Mahomes passed for over 260 yards per game, had more than 25 touchdowns, and hit the 300-yard mark on several occasions. He also showed a consistent presence on the ground, finishing 7th in QB rush yards. Still, this was Mahomes' least efficient season, as it was his first time finishing with a TD to INT ratio less than 3. He was still good in 2023, but he wasn't the MVP Mahomes we're used to seeing until the playoffs actually came around. Lucky number 7 in the ranking is Josh Allen. Talent-wise, Allen should be higher, as he has one of the strongest arms and is one of the fastest at his position as well. He tied Jalen Hurts with an NFL-leading 15 rushing touchdowns to go along with 4,000 passing yards and 29 touchdowns. Yet, Allen didn't look as sharp as seasons past, as he turned the ball over in 14 of his 17 starts, totaling 18 interceptions total. Despite the inefficiencies, Allen did have the lowest sack rate in the NFL, saw his fumbles decrease, and truly carried Buffalo to the playoffs. Still, the turnover problems force Allen outside of 2023's top 5. The final entrant before the top 5 is Jared Goff, who I ranked at 6. Goff, who often goes overlooked in the NFL, helped the Detroit Lions have their best season in our lifetimes. He was second in passing yards this season to go along with a 2.5 TD to INT ratio. He did have 2 multi-interception games late in the season, but still finished with a strong 67% completion rate, tied for the NFL lead with only 1 game of 200 yards or less, and had a 5-touchdown game in Week 15. He was consistent for the most part, but the players above him were just a little better. This now brings us to the top 5. Starting off here, I have Brock Purdy. This may be an unpopular selection given the talented roster he is on, however, he was still one of the most efficient players in 2023. He finished first in passer rating, quarterback rating, yards per attempt, touchdown percentage, and first down percentage, while finishing 4th in completion percentage among players to start more than 3 games. He was one of the only players to throw for over 4,000 yards and 30 touchdowns, while finishing second to only CJ Stroud in yards per game. Outside of his 4-interception game in Week 17, he took very good care of the ball, ending the season with a TD to INT ratio of nearly 3 and turning the ball over in only 6 of his 16 starts. Brock Purdy was very good in 2023, and if it wasn't for players above him doing just as good or better with less of a supporting cast, he would be higher on the list. Still, a top 5 spot is remarkable for Purdy. Just missing a podium position, Jordan Love comes in at number 4. Love silenced critics in 2023 as he was 2nd in passing touchdowns and 7th in passing yards in his first full season as a starter. He also finished 12th in rushing yards among QBs, had more rushing touchdowns than fumbles lost, and had a TD to INT ratio of nearly 3. Most importantly, he led the Packers on a massive run down the stretch where they not only made the playoffs, but upset the Dallas Cowboys as well. In his last 10 games, Love had just 2 games in which he threw an interception and passed for 21 touchdowns to only 3 picks. This was surely the best 10-game run of any QB this season. The lack of supporting cast for Love is what made things all the more impressive. He's the only player in the top 10 to not have a single receiver obtain more than 800 receiving yards or 70 receptions. He threw to a cast of receivers the average fan had never heard of and still finished near the top of the league in many passing stats. If Love can duplicate his last 10 games for an entire season in 2024, he will find himself in the top 3 next year. CJ Stroud was the 3rd best quarterback in 2023 and perhaps the best rookie quarterback of all time. Stroud put up numbers in his rookie season on a team nobody expected to be strong offensively. Of players to start 8 or more games, he had the fewest interceptions, led the league in passing yards per game, and had a TD to INT ratio of 4.6. Stroud was also not overprotective by any means. He led the league in single-game passing yards this season when he put up 470 yards against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Stroud also tied with Derek Carr for the most 300-plus yard games with 6. Stroud finished his rookie season with a passer rating above 100, being just the 4th rookie to ever do so, and also added 3 rushing touchdowns. Sure, he wasn't as much of a dual threat compared to others, but a rookie carrying his team to the playoffs in his first year is amazing, which allows Stroud to finish number 3. Getting the silver medal is the actual MVP winner, Lamar Jackson. A case for Jackson being the best QB in 2023 can be made as he was the best player on the best team. He had a higher completion percentage and passer rating than Stroud while putting up similar touchdown and interception numbers at 24 and 7, good enough for a 3.42 TD to INT ratio. He also added 3,678 passing yards, 800 rushing yards, and 5 rushing touchdowns while finishing 5th in touchdown percentage. Outside of Jordan Love, he arguably had the worst receiving core among top 15 quarterbacks, with none of his receivers managing to have over 1,000 yards or 80 receptions. Still, Lamar had a phenomenal year, and regardless of where you put him in your top 3, he was unquestionably a top 3 quarterback this year. Personally, I have him at number 2. At number 1, I have Dak Prescott as the best quarterback from the 2023 regular season. He was the only QB to throw more than 35 touchdowns and also added an additional 2 rushing TDs. Dak joined Joe Flacco as the only men to throw for more than 2 touchdowns per game, and he was very efficient while doing so. He ended the season with a TD to INT ratio of 4 and a completion percentage of nearly 70. Dak also had the longest passing play of the season to CeeDee Lamb at 92 yards. The efficient manner in which Dak put up results speaks wonders in a league that saw 15 players finish with double-digit interceptions, Prescott not being one of them. Obviously, MVP voters favored Lamar Jackson's dual-threat ability over Dak's more traditional game, but I personally appreciate the aerial efficiency more than a quarterback who scrambles, so I am content saying Prescott was the best quarterback in 2023. But what do you guys think? Was Dak Prescott the best performing QB of the 2023 season? And if not, who should be number one? Who was the biggest surprise of the ranking? And who do you agree or disagree with? Let me know in the comments and don't forget to subscribe.